Welcome to the 2021 Major Donor Symposium. In this breakout session, entitled Seeking Foundation Support Post-COVID, you will be guided through a more strategic and relational approach to raising funds from foundations. As you listen to the content, feel free to engage with the Q&A feature where our team members will be standing by to address your questions. Q&A will be available during the session today and for 15 minutes afterwards. For additional resources, including a copy of the slides from today's presentation, please return to the breakout session event page after the session to download these resources. This breakout session and all the ones offered today will be available on demand beginning tomorrow. As we get started though, let's kick off our time together by letting everyone know where you are joining from and the organization you are connected with. Please add that to the chat feature now. Enjoy the time with John Franklin from the Murdock Charitable Trust.
Well, thank you, Brad, for this opportunity to present on major donors, specifically as it relates to foundations. My name is John Franklin. I work at a private foundation, but I come out of your world. I was involved on the other side of the table for 32 years in my work with nonprofits as a representative with the Murdock Trust, which is where I work now. So I'm privileged to talk to you a little bit about seeking grant funding from a foundation. And I'm going to repeat something that Brad has probably already said, but foundations are certainly a viable source of funding, but nothing compares like individual givers from major donors. So I really want to emphasize that if I went back in the nonprofit world tomorrow, my main focus would be individuals. But yet at the same time, foundations are a good source, and that's what I'm privileged to talk to you about. You know, there's several different types of foundations. There's family-run foundations. There's community foundations. For example, out here in Oregon, we have the Oregon Community Foundation that they make grants themselves from their own funding, but also they have donor advised funds that families will house. Sometimes they're family foundations within a community foundation so that they can make grants through that community foundation. There's corporate foundations, and then there's foundations like the foundation I work at, the Murdock Charitable Trust, which is termed a private foundation, and we are indeed a large private foundation. There's several things you want to know about a foundation. You don't want to just go blindly making foundation applications, grant applications to a multitude of foundations in your area. You want to do some research. So the kind of things that you want to find out is, for example, what have they funded in the past? What are their present funding interests? Sometimes not ours, but sometimes foundations can shift from one thing to the next in terms of what's their current interest for funding. What size of grants do they usually give? You don't want to go in and make a huge request that's way above what they might normally fund. And similarly, you don't want to come in and lowball. You want to do your research on that. What are the guidelines for submission? Different foundations will have different steps that you adhere to in making a proposal. For example, we're kind of a two-step process. First, you submit a letter of inquiry, which is generally a 1 or 2 page summary of your project. And if that's accepted, you're invited to submit a full grant application. And then what are their geographic guidelines? We have very specific, the Murdock Trust here, very specific geographic guidelines where we generally fund projects in the Northwest. So let me talk to you, for example, about the Murdock Trust so you can see the kind of information that you want to get about a foundation when you do your research. If you researched us, that you would discover that the things that we fund are education-related projects, scientific research, arts and culture, health, specifically rural health, and human services, which is the largest sector. That's just because it almost operates as the miscellaneous type sector for nonprofits. But the thing that we don't fund, and I want to underscore this, is we don't fund general operational funding. And I got to tell you that most foundations don't fund general operational funding. If you do find a foundation that is interested in you, that funds general operating funds on an annual basis, that is gold. I mean, take care of that relationship. Most foundations, however, are like ours, where they're going to fund new stuff. And then most foundations are like us, again, that we have a specific geographic interest. And for us, it's the Northwest. So that's where we limit our giving. You want to also make sure that your mission matches their mission, that you're an organization that they would have interest in actually funding. And so you need to do your research on that. The best way, and I'm probably going to say this more than once, to do your research is with a conversation with somebody there at the foundation, either over the phone or go visit them in person. I'll say this more than once too. Foundations are people. They're represented by people. So don't treat them as some nebulous entity. Go visit them or talk to them on the phone if you have the opportunity. Visit their website to see if you're a good fit with them. Look at past annual reports to see if there's organizations like you that they funded, and talk to other nonprofits that do what you do and see if they've ever received funding from that foundation or if, they know if that foundation would be a good fit for them or for you as well. And then also your local nonprofit association. If you have a local nonprofit association, they can not only give you specific information about a particular foundation, but they can maybe, once they understand what you do, they can maybe point you in the direction of foundations that would fit what you do. So contacting the foundation, just a couple thoughts about that. Least effective is to visit their website. The next least would be to shoot them an email. The second best would to give them a phone call. And the very best way to contact a foundation, if they'll let you, would be go visit them in person. Again, as I said, a lot of foundations will require that you send a letter of inquiry first before actually submitting a proposal. But I'll tell you this, even if they don't require a letter of inquiry, it's not a bad idea to submit a 1 to 2 page summary of what it is that you're interested in doing and see if it's something that they would be interested in hearing from you about. But again, nothing compares to a formal conversation where you go in and visit with them. Let me tell you about the process at the Murdock Trust so you can get a general idea for the process that most foundations might put you through in terms of submitting a request. So for us, first of all, any organization can submit a letter of inquiry, again, which is a 1 to 2 page summary of your proposal. And this is what I like to say. You know that you're ready to submit a letter of inquiry when you could actually fill out the whole proposal tomorrow. Do not submit a letter of inquiry if the proposal is still kind of fuzzy in your mind. You better be ready in writing that letter of inquiry to actually fill out a whole grant application because you know exactly what it is you're going after in that proposal. So for us, if that letter of inquiry is accepted, then you're invited to submit a formal grant application. And at that point, once the application comes in, it's going to get assigned to a program director, which is what I do. I'm going to call you. I'm going to set up a site visit, which now would be over Zoom. But in the future would be, once we're out of this pandemic, would be an in-person site visit where I'll come visit you. And if it's a capital project in particular, I'm going to look over the project. Once I have that site visit, I'll go back and I'll write a report for our trustees. Our trustees read those reports and then they render their decisions. And then if your proposal happens to get funded, we'll have an ongoing relationship because you'll be turning in reports to me that will release payments over a period of time. I want to tell you the types of things that the Murdock Trust funds so that you can get an idea of what types of projects that other foundations would fund. We fund capital projects. So that would be like, for example, the purchase of a property or a building, or it could be land purchase, or it could be new construction, or it could be renovation. So capital projects. We also fund program staff. So for example, new staff that would build out your capacity, strategic positions, for example, like maybe a development director, a chief operating officer, or a volunteer coordinator. We also would fund program staff for a staff expansion, a program expansion, like you're starting a whole new program that's going to require a new staff person. We fund equipment expenses. Oftentimes that would be a big technology request, expanding your technology. And again, I'm going to repeat myself again, we do not provide funding for general operation funds. And I know most foundations don't, some do. And when you do find that foundation, as I said, they're gold. Typical evaluation of a project. What's the foundation going to, how are they going to evaluate your project? So first of all, they're going to want to make sure that your project is consistent with your mission. In other words, is this project actually going to get you further down the road in accomplishing your mission? Is it smart? Is it something you should be doing? Hopefully what we look for, is this really a top priority for the organization? Or is this just something that maybe they thought we might fund, so they came to us with this project. We want to determine how important this project is to you. Does your project budget make sense? Is it reasonable? Do the different items in the budget make sense for the scope of the project? Do you show a funding plan that's going to be able to cover the balance of the funding that we're not going to provide? Does it look adequate? And does your funding plan have grassroots support? Are there other donors involved? Or are you just looking for our support and maybe some internal funds to cover the balance of the funding? We want to see that other donors are involved. And do you have a plan for sustaining the project? Are you going to be able to pay for it once our funds are gone? Some other thoughts about the evaluation of your project is we want to know if this project is going to require new personnel, like if you're going to hire a volunteer coordinator, who's going to supervise that person and who's going to train them in how to do this job. That's specifically relevant when you talk about hiring a development director. Are you capable? Do you have experienced development people on your staff that are going to be able to supervise or train that person? And if not, maybe have you built some funding into your budget to not only train the potential development director, but maybe to train you on how to lead a development director? If you're building a new building, is this new building going to require additional personnel? Are you going to be able to afford these additional personnel? Have you budgeted for maintaining that building? How are you taking care of your current buildings? Are utilities going to be included in the operating budget? We also want to make sure that your board is really on board with the project, that this just isn't something that the executive director is excited about. We really actually, in coming in and doing a site visit, almost try to read the body language a little bit to see if the board members are really, on board with the executive director in this project, that they're owning it together. And a good way of showing that is, are they financially involved? Are they not only supporting the organization, but actually perhaps even putting support towards the project, which is especially important in a capital project. And again, I've said this earlier, but is the project sustainable? Are they going to be able to afford it once our funding is gone? And then is the timing right for the project? For example, it's probably not a good idea to be requesting funding for a new program from a foundation when you're currently in an operating deficit. You're not able to pay for what you're currently doing. The other thing that we want to look at is we want to look at just the overall health of the organization. What's your track record right now? What's your impact? Are the numbers trending in the right direction? We want to know the experience level and the competency of your leadership, your executive leadership. We also want to look at the board. How engaged are they? Are they providing good governance? Are they stewarding the finances well? Are they stewarding the mission well? If you have a physical property, are they stewarding your facilities well? Is the board involved financially, both in terms of their annual giving, but also are they supporting the project? Other things we want to look at are just the health of your finances. Are the numbers trending in the right direction? What's your business model? Earned income versus contributed income. And, we're not going to dictate the percentages there, but our question is it working for you? And is your business model, your revenue model sustainable? Do you have reserves, operating reserves? And if you have a physical property, do you have building reserves? Are you dealing with debt right now? And if so, are you able to take care of your debt? Are you, and regarding your current assets, your physical assets, is there deferred maintenance? Are you taking care of your buildings? Most often, if I go to visit an organization that is requesting funding for a capital project, like camps, for example, one of my areas of purview is camps. So if I go to visit a camp and they're asking for a new building, when I get a tour of their property, I am looking around to notice any deferred maintenance that they're not taking care of. I remember when we were approached by a Boys and Girls Club with a big project. Before the grants meeting, I went and looked at 2 or 3 of their other buildings just to make sure they're taking care of their current buildings, that they're addressing their deferred maintenance. So that's really important to us as well. And then the staff stability. Has there been a turnover of staff? Have there been staff cuts? It's challenging to approach a foundation for a new staff position when maybe recently there was a staff cut in a similar department. I know it's different during a pandemic. Everybody's made staff cuts. But coming out of the pandemic, as we build back our staff, hopefully when you go to approach a foundation for, let's just say a new development position within your organization, they're going to see if there's been recent cuts in your development department. And that would not be a good position to be in when you're requesting a new position. So some tips from a grant maker. And I'm actually going to give you tips. I'm speaking on both sides of the table, not only from a current grant maker, but again, somebody that just 8 years ago was on your side of the table. These are some very important items. First of all, do your homework. Again, I've already mentioned this, but study the website. Be a scholar and a student of that organization. I can always tell when somebody comes in and talks to me if they've actually looked at our website and got familiarity with other organizations that we've granted, the types of grants we give, the size of grants we give, the types of things we support. Talk with similar organizations that do what you do, who've received funding from the foundation, so you can learn more about them and be proficient in how to relate to them. Identify your highest priority project. We already talked about this, but again, we want to make sure when you come in and talk to us about a project that this is really important to you. Again, that you haven't just thought of something that you think that we might be interested in, but it's really going to forward your mission. Make sure that you've got your leadership's buy-in. If we can come in and detect that the house is divided, that maybe the executive staff is really committed to this project, but the board is just so-so, that's not a strong position to be in. Make sure your financial house is in order. Again, we're all pulling out of a financial mess during the pandemic, but make sure that when you do apply to a foundation, that there's some health and that your numbers are beginning to move in the right direction. Make sure you plan well. And what I mean by that, does this project come out of your strategic plan? I think this is something that's so important, and it's a question that I ask directly. Do you have a strategic plan? Tell me about it. And then my next question would be, and is this project we're talking about today, is it incorporated in your strategic plan? Does it make sense for you as an organization? And then make sure that you have a detailed funding plan. What I mean by that, when we get to the funding plan for, let's say, a new building at a camp, anybody can slap down, we're going to have 10 major donors that are going to give to this project. My question is going to be, tell me about those major donors. You don't have to give me names, but just walk through each of them and tell me, how much you're going to approach them for. Are they current givers? Is this amount comparable to what they've given in the past? So be prepared with a detailed funding plan that makes sense. Some common mistakes that organizations make when they apply to foundations that I've seen, and I regret to say that I've made some of these on the other side too of the table. Hard to read proposals. And oftentimes for me, that's a proposal that's just too long with too much detail. Or sometimes there might be inconsistent info. For example, they say something on page 3, they present some numbers on page 3 regarding their programs, and then they give contradictory information on page 7 that doesn't make sense. And you got to know that when you submit a proposal to a foundation, it's assigned to somebody like me, I devour that thing. I'll spend a minimum of 4 to 5 hours a day before a grants visit researching your organization, not only looking at your proposal, but reading about you online. And so I come in and I'm a semi-expert on what you do, but I certainly know your proposal. So make sure that thing is carefully put together. I already mentioned this, but make sure that your dollar request is not out of line with our history. I've had organizations that have come in and it's clear they haven't researched us. They've asked for an amount that is way too high compared to similar grants that we've made to similar organizations, or they come in low. We don't generally entertain grant requests of less than $50,000, for example. Make sure that your funding plan for your project has some overage. Now, what I mean by that, when you present, when the balance of funding to be raised after our grant would be $200,000, for example, it would be a soft funding plan that had the difference at a 1-to-1 correspondence. In other words, your funding plan should probably equal 150% of what you need to raise. That there would be that kind of overage. That would be a more healthy funding plan with some overage that would build a bit more confidence in the potential of your funding plan. Make sure, as I said, that your board is involved. They're behind this project. If it's a capital project, certainly that they've given to this project and they're giving generously. Make sure that there's other sources of funding that are clearly delineated, a clear funding plan in your project. It's not a nebulous or hopeful funding plan, but there's some substance there. Make sure that you've verified your ability to sustain the project. And here's a big one too. Don't gloss over project challenges. Here's how we are trained as program directors from foundations. We are trained to ask the questions that we anticipate our trustees will ask. We want to help you succeed. It's our job to help you put your best foot forward with our trustees, but we tend to know how they think, so we know the questions they might ask. So we're going to ask you those questions. And, I think a great thing for you to do is to anticipate what those questions might be. There might be 3 or 4 things that you predict based on your project, and these could be the soft spots in your project. You predict that we might ask, and be ready to respond to those, and maybe even bring them up if we don't, because that's how we're going to help you put your best foot forward with our trustees. Again, above all, treat foundations like a person, because they're led by people, and the trustees are people. So develop the relationship. Treat them like individual donors. Treat foundations like major donors. As I mentioned, this is, I think, the 3rd time I said this. Visit them if they'll let you. Invite them to your facility for a tour to see what it is that you do. Keep them informed. And a great question to ask, I've had a lot of wise funders ask me this question. They'll say, so how do you want to be informed about us as an organization? Do you want me to be in touch monthly to give you updates or send you periodic reports? And I'll tell you how we operate. You don't need to babysit us or take care of us on a monthly basis. Just do good work and perhaps reach out to us on an annual basis and give us an update. And it's always good for us, at least, to hear from people personally. Call us on the phone or come visit us. And always, always, I just want to underscore this, stay true to who you are. Don't ever change what you do to fit a funder. Don't chase foundation money. Stay true to your strategic plan and approach a foundation when you have something within your plan that they think they might have an interest in funding. So that's a lot of information, and I'm looking forward to taking some of your questions and answers now.